Hi and welcome. This is Homebody Rundown and I'm HR. This is week 6 of a 6-week pantry challenge. So, made it to the last week and it's been really kind of fun to think of new and different things to make with what I have in the house. We eat a mostly pescatarian diet, that's vegetarian with seafood, and we are a family of 5. However, our 2 oldest kids are at college right now, so I am only cooking for 3, myself, my husband, and youngest child. Youngest child does eat chicken, so sometimes she is making her own thing and doesn't eat what I make in this video. Or she's just eating the sides and making her own entree, whatever that may be. I did continue going to the grocery store to get some essentials during Pantry Challenge like dairy, produce, and eggs. In all, I spent $196.11 over this 6-week period. Normally, I would have spent well over $1,000, so I definitely was buying less because I do like to stock up when there's sales, but it was really nice to not be running to the store a lot. Also, I just want to say that I am not a health professional or a nutritionist, and I am not saying that these meals are ideal or nutritionally perfect in any way. We, do our research, and I think we do all right. You guys are not seeing everything that we eat. These are just more of the interesting things that I make during the week. Also, this is not a recipe channel. I rarely even have the patience to follow someone else's recipe, let alone test my own. So I tend to just cook to taste. I keep trying things and modifying them as I go. If there is a reference recipe, though, I will link it in the description. We visited the boys this past weekend and got them groceries. These are the extra groceries that I brought home for us to use, so I'm counting those in this pantry challenge budget. The total was $10.40. Making an enchilada rice and bean casserole today. These are some red onions that were in the refrigerator, black beans from the freezer, Trader Joe's roasted corn from the freezer. I have not used it before. Chipotle peppers and adobo sauce, and roasted garlic, both from the freezer. Also, this olive mixture. I just had extra olives, chopped them up, and put them in the freezer. It's black and green. Pre-cooked rice, shredded, I think it's Colby Jack from the freezer. This is enchilada sauce from Whole Foods, which has quite a bit of sodium in it. I also have cilantro, smoked paprika, avocado oil, black pepper, garlic powder, and onion powder to season it. This is avocado oil into an enameled cast iron pan. I just like to use this because I can take it from the stove and put it into the oven. All the other items from the freezer had defrosted somewhat, but the corn was straight out of the freezer, so I am going to get that heated through with red onions and seasoning. Oh, I'm just showing this silicone, I believe, spatula spoon thing. I love it to use it in this pan. I got it at TJ Maxx, but I haven't seen any more there. I probably got this a couple years ago. So this has warmed through pretty well, adding in more seasonings. This is cilantro, roasted garlic. I did chop the chipotles up so you don't get a big bite of chipotle. They're a little spicy. The black beans, I did warm these up in the microwave for a few minutes because they were still pretty frozen. The smoked paprika is already in here, along with black pepper, garlic powder, onion powder. The rice, because it's pre-cooked and it had been in the refrigerator, had clumped together. So I like to use this meat masher to really just break the rice up so it's not in big clumps. Adding some of the enchilada sauce, I do end up adding more. But adding that liquid really helps release all of that brown seasoning and flavor on the bottom of the pan. I have turned the heat off at this point. I am sprinkling over the olive mixture. I only used a small part of that. I did end up using all of the cheese. There was probably over a cup or so, and a few more of those chopped olives on the top. I've preheated the oven, so I will get that in there for not very long, just like 10 minutes to get the cheese melted. Diced a tomato and sprinkled that over the top. Adds a nice flavor. I got out a small plate. I wasn't planning to eat much of this, but it turned out really good. It was tasty. My husband also said it was very good. Youngest child does not eat a casserole, so she just had rice and chicken tenders and corn. So this was my plate. And once this is in the refrigerator and cools down, sometimes I add more salsa to it when I warm it up so it's not dry. I forgot to say no substitutions when I did my last Whole Foods order, so they substituted these blueberry bagels for regular bagels, and they taste fine, but we're just not blueberry bagel people. We are definitely plain bagels with everything, seasoning and cream cheese kind of people, so these were not getting eaten. So I diced a few of them up along with these failed attempts to make cinnamon rolls with puff pastry. These didn't taste bad. They were just kind of crispier than you really want for a cinnamon roll. So anyway, I'd pulled those out of the freezer and diced those up as well, making a quick French toast casserole mixture. I don't measure this. I just eyeball it, but it's brown sugar, some kosher salt, some vanilla, and I could have added a little more vanilla. I usually do, but it wasn't a large amount. Since the boys aren't here, I'm trying to really work on making smaller quantities of food. Cinnamon, and I had milk that I had mixed up from whole milk powder. So using that, it was a whole milk, and then added a couple eggs. Whisking that up the best I can. The cinnamon doesn't really distribute very well when I'm just mixing it by hand, but it's fine as long as there's no giant clumps of cinnamon. And the color on the blueberry bagels it's pretty. It's a very pretty purple kind of color. Drizzled a little maple syrup and a sprinkling of salt, just a little more salt over the top. I like to add some fat to this. If I want to make it taste really good, I will add thin slices of butter, but today I'm just adding avocado oil to be a little healthier, less cholesterol, and I covered that in foil and got it in the oven. While that's baking, I am prepping some vegetables for dinner. This is broccoli I got on clearance at Walmart, and it was a little dry or a little discolored at the ends of most of the stalks, so I was chopping those off and then cutting them into smaller, more bite-sized pieces. Also sliced up 2 large red onions. I have this in the frying pan with avocado oil, salt, and black pepper. I won't use all of these for dinner. Some of this will be for meals later in the week. Got those out of the pan and adding toasted sesame oil and the broccoli. I am not following a recipe, but it's closely inspired by a pinch of yum recipe that I will link down below. Here are the ingredients. I have garlic from the freezer, ginger from the freezer, black pepper, rice vinegar, soy sauce, oyster sauce, the oils that I've already mentioned, and brown sugar. I'm using angel hair pasta, which I already had cooked in the refrigerator. Adding a little more oil to the broccoli, and for some saltiness, using just a small amount of soy sauce. The recipe this was inspired by calls for dark soy sauce, but I am not familiar with that. I don't have it. To make my version of a sauce, I'm using most of the ingredients that are listed in that recipe. This is soy sauce, oyster sauce, which are both very salty, rice vinegar, brown sugar. I think this is light brown sugar. Dark brown would be excellent. And then I didn't show it, but I also added in a lot of ground pepper. I only have the pre-ground stuff. I'm sure freshly ground would be amazing. Realizing that this is not getting tender very quickly, so I put a lid on it. I should have started with the lid and let it steam for a few minutes before I fried it, but lesson learned. Getting the broccoli out of the pan, the heat is off. Adding in avocado oil, the garlic and the ginger, turning the heat back on, and it's really pulling up the brown on the bottom of the pan. Here's that sauce, and I am just letting this heat through for a minute or two on a fairly low heat. We'll coat these noodles in the sauce and get them hot through, and then adding in the onions and the broccoli that were already cooked. It absorbed a lot of the sauce, so I mixed up just a small amount more. I know it's going to taste great, but it is going to be a pretty high sodium dinner. It looked really nice though. I added chopped peanuts and it tasted amazing. I mean, really, really amazing. I love the black pepper taste. I, in the future, plan to make the actual recipe that I link below and follow it to a T. Also, I was planning to scramble eggs to go along with this, and I just totally spaced it. I don't know why, but it would have made it a much more filling meal, and I'll make sure to add that or maybe veggie steak when I make it again. It's the next morning, and I am getting out this French toast casserole. I warmed it up in the microwave, added blueberries that I had defrosting in the refrigerator, and some maple syrup. It was great. The blueberry bagels made for fantastic French toast casserole. Lunch today is going to be a quiche, and we'll have plenty of leftovers, so this will also be, more lunches or breakfast this week. I'm using a store-bought pie crust, goat cheese from Costco that I broke up with a fork, roasted garlic, turmeric, black pepper, onion powder, garlic powder, nutritional yeast, milk that I mixed up from a powder, red onion. I won't use all of this red onion, just a small part of it. Diced one tomato that's fairly small, and some roasted red peppers that I had in the refrigerator. This is, I think I did 9 eggs. Usually I do 10, but I was adding a lot of stuff. Almost had a half cup, which is what I usually add in here, of milk. It was close enough. Using the KitchenAid to whisk this together, I do have to scrape down the sides. The seasonings tend to stick along the sides and the bottom. Here is the nutritional yeast, getting that whisked in, scraping the sides again. Normally I take the crust and roll it around the edges. These Whole Food brand ones are a little larger than the brand I normally buy. I think I think the ones I usually get are the Immaculate brand, but these are a lot cheaper. Added the tomato, pepper, onions to the bottom of the pie plate or onto the pie crust, sprinkling with parsley, dried parsley, which I did not have out earlier, just for some color, and using my hands to crumble the goat cheese into even smaller amounts. This has a very yellow color, not just from egg yolks, but the turmeric has a very mustardy yellow color. So I think I started to say, but I'm not rolling it down tight. I thought I would just kind of fold over that excess dough so it's not such a thick piece of dough around the edge. I bake this for 20 minutes at a high temperature, 400. Then I take it down to a lower temperature for the majority of the bake. And I'm putting some tin foil on this so the crust doesn't get too done, and it probably helps cook the eggs in the center as well. Just to know, I pulled this all the way out of the oven so I could show it on camera more easily, but normally, to be safer, I would not try to lift this out. It's still very liquidy and now it's hot, so I would just bring the rack out a little ways, lay the tin foil over it, and push the rack gently back in the oven. Otherwise, you could also have this on a cookie sheet so it'd be easier to take in and out. I got this idea from, I think it's Better, I don't know if it's Better Homes and Garden or Betty Crocker. I will look. Their quiche Lorraine bakes this way. This is not a quiche Lorraine. I'm not following the recipe, but that's where I got the idea to bake high and then bake low. The crust looks pretty good, but I should have let it go a little longer. You can see here, it's really clear. Everything that I put into the bottom of the pie crust moves to the top of the finished quiche, and the eggs sink down. But the crust right in the center was still a little doughy, so it could have used another 5-10 minutes. And I did take the foil off for the last 10 minutes of the bake. I'm going to make bread today, but I needed to refill this sugar dispenser. I play a dangerous game in my kitchen. I have 2 of these dispensers. One I use for salt, one I use for sugar. Now, luckily, I buy this organic sugar, so it has a color to it, like a light brown color. And I do label them. And I keep them in separate parts of the kitchen. And I've never accidentally used salt instead of sugar, but that day is probably coming. Anyway, I like to have the convenience of the small sugar container when I only need, like in this, I needed 2 tablespoons of sugar. That way I don't have to get out the big container of sugar. In this pan, there's also salt, milk, and butter. I got it way too hot. It's supposed to be between 120 and 130 degrees, and it was in the 140s, so I am going to let that cool down for a while. Into the KitchenAid, I have flour and all-purpose flour and yeast. Another note, I am not going to make this bread any longer in the KitchenAid mixer, or at least not the second part where I add in the rest of the flour. I don't know what the max capacity is for flour on this mixer, but I feel like maybe it's straining the motor to do so much in here. And I have destroyed a motor before, so please don't make my mistake. The liquid is cooled down, and it says to mix it and scrape the sides, so I switched out the dough hook for this mixer blade with the scraper. And it is very gooey. I will link the recipe for this bread, if I can find it online, in the description. It is from Better Homes and Gardens, the cookbook that I have from about 25 years ago. And it has an option to substitute part of the all-purpose flour with whole wheat flour, which is what I did. So I added the rest of the flour, got the dough hook back on, and something was wrong. This is way too dry. And I reread the recipe, and instead of 1 1/4 or 2 1/4 cups of milk, I did 1 1/4 cup. So I got out another cup of milk, warmed it up in the microwave for a little bit, and mixed that in. So it made a dough. I don't know how this is going to turn out because it's already whole wheat flour in here, so it's dense, but I don't know. Anyway, I spray the pan with avocado oil and get the dough in there. My oven has a proof function, so I will put it in the oven. It does have to rise longer with the whole wheat flour than if I'm just using all-purpose flour. It's been about an hour and a half, and the dough looks pretty good. It seems to have recovered from my mistake. And I think you're supposed to put a little more effort into shaping this into loaves, but I'm not really doing anything. I'm just going to cut it in half and shape the ends a bit with my hands. Then you are supposed to leave it on the counter to rest for 10 minutes. I do cover it with a towel so it doesn't dry out, spraying the loaf pans with avocado oil spray, and then I will get the loaves back into the oven to proof for another hour or so. And just an aside, finished up another pantry item. These are graham crackers. I've taken to marking the boxes with a Sharpie so they don't go bad. Crackers just don't seem to have a very long shelf life. These have proofed in the oven. They look really good. There are some gaps at the bottom where it didn't really fill in the loaf pan, but whatever. Have the oven preheating and we'll get this baked. They are looking pretty done, but the bottom's not hard. It's still soft. It's a darker color because of the whole wheat. And while those are cooling, I'm going to make this gluten-free brownie mix because I noticed it's expiring this month. I have never made this before. It's from Trader Joe's. And it's, regular. It's very basic brownie mix. Egg, water, oil. And both of my KitchenAid mixer bowls were dirty or in the process of getting clean, so husband came out and stirred this for me, which was nice. Like most brownie mixes, this does need to bake for quite a while. I did roast some butternut squash in between the brownies and the bread. Going to use that for dinner along with this chopped spinach. This is olive oil. The bag of spinach has been defrosting a little while in the refrigerator. Mushroom umami seasoning from Trader Joe's. I'll also add garlic powder, onion powder, black pepper, and salt. Right, also red pepper flakes. The main entree are these potato and cheese pierogis. These are from Costco. I got them out of the freezer a day ago. It does say to let them defrost in the refrigerator. And I plan to make a butter sauce at the end. Olive oil in the pan, and I'm gently pressing these just to create a flatter surface area, but you have to be careful. If you press them too hard, then the dough will break. Here's the bread sliced after it's cooled down. It looks really good. There's a thick crust on the top, and I always have that when I use whole wheat flour. I'm not sure if I'm over baking it or that's just a thing that's going to happen, but it tastes great. And this was delicious with butter on it. Everyone had a slice with dinner on this night. And then this always makes wonderful toast. I forgot to show it earlier, but this is the book where I got this bread recipe from, and if it's online, I will link it in the description. So these are getting a nice crispy side to them, so I'm flipping them over gently, adding those sauteed onions that I made extra of last night, and vegan butter. I just had a bunch of this that I need to use up, and finishing it with some lemon juice as well. When I was a kid at my grandparents' house, we would always add vinegar at the table onto greens, which I also like, but my family's not a fan of that, so I tend to just do the lemon juice. The pierogis are done, got crispy on both sides, so I took those out and added butter to the same pan. I did turn the heat off and let the pan cool for a few minutes before I added that butter so I wouldn't get splattered. With the heat back on, I added in seasonings, the mushroom umami, garlic powder, onion powder, black pepper. And I let the butter cook for a few minutes until it started getting a little bit of a brown color. Part of that color is from the umami seasoning. Put the pierogis back in the pan and coated them in this sauce. It was a very rich, fatty sauce. Well, not rich, but fatty because there was still olive oil in the pan. But that butter was just a wonderful treat and delicious on these. The filling is also very good. I would buy these again. And the spinach and onion, it was really good. I think that it definitely needed the flavorings that I added at the end there. The vegan butter was really good on it. And the squash was delicious. This also had pretty much the same seasonings as the pierogis. Brownies are done, I think, and I have to say, they were terrible. I thought they were so gross. I don't know if they had spoiled or gone bad or stale or something. My husband ate his, but youngest child did not like them either. And I don't know. I've had plenty of gluten-free brownies. I've been making them for years from box mixes like King Arthur box mix. I think I've even made the Whole Foods box mix. And they've gotten really good in the years since I started making them. But these just had an off flavor to me. The texture's different. It is gluten-free, but it was the flavor. I don't know. If you've had these and they tasted great, please let me know in the comments. Maybe I just had some bad ones. Attempting to make California rolls for lunch on this day. This is not something I usually make for lunch, but I had the time to do it. It does take a little bit of prep time. This is the Lundberg, I think it's the Lundberg sushi rice, and it suggests after you rinse it to soak it for half an hour before you cook it. Unfortunately, I only had an orange pepper. I do prefer a red pepper in these. I had carrots, and I chopped up some peanuts. I think the soaking definitely helped this rice. It was a much better texture than the last time I made it when I did not soak it. I'm going to season it with salt, sugar, and vinegar, but I am going to pull some plain out for dinner. All right, these little cups of avocado mash had just expired, but I tried it and it still tasted good. So I'm going to use this because I don't have any fresh avocado, which is what I usually add to sushi rolls. Unfortunately, I did all the prep, made the rice, cut up the veggies. Then I got out the avocado cups, which only my husband had been eating. I had not had one, and I did not realize they were seasoned. I thought it was just avocado, but these are avocado with salt and black pepper. So that's weird. I was still going to make them, though. I had everything cut up, so here we go. And then I realized I had put the nori on the sushi mat the wrong way. So I had to try to carefully turn it. I've been making these for about, I don't know, at least 15 years. I've never done that before. Anyway, got it turned without tearing the nori and got those rolled up and in the refrigerator for about an hour. And now I'm going to make oatmeal cookies with these little white chocolate chips. Normally I make oatmeal raisin cookies, but we ran out of raisins. So it does take butter. I had 2 sticks of butter left, so not enough to make sugar cookies, which is what I've been wanting to make, but this uses shortening and butter, so it's only 1 stick of butter. This is brown sugar, white sugar, 2 eggs, vanilla, and I am only using whole wheat flour. It only takes a cup of flour, and got the baking powder, baking soda, cinnamon in there, and salt. I use a mix of 1 cup instant oatmeal or quick oats and 2 cups of regular oats. And just getting that all worked together, and then I'll add in those little white chocolate chips. These little veggie avocado rolls really did not work out. They were edible. The black pepper did not bother me as much as I thought it would, but the avocado mashed, it was just too soft and loose. They were hard to cut. They didn't hold their shape well, so I won't do that again, but it was worth a shot. The oatmeal cookies were in the refrigerator for a couple hours chilling, so now got them shaped onto the cookie sheets and bake them. They turned out really well. I like the color on these, looks pretty good. They were a whole wheat flour, so I think that makes them look a little darker. I did miss the raisins though. It'll be nice to restock a few things in another week. Not sure what to call dinner tonight. The flavors are inspired by butter chicken. I don't know if I can link the recipe. I'm going to add lentils, all of these spices, coriander, turmeric, cumin, garam masala, some cinnamon, and I have crushed ginger from the freezer, cilantro from the freezer, and diced up a tomato. This is red onion in avocado oil. Got in all of those spices. Sorry, I don't measure them. I would say the one I use the most of is the garam masala. And just letting those onions cook for a few minutes, adding in the garlic. This is a chicken-flavored vegetarian bouillon cube, tomato paste, and I'll take my spatula and break up that bouillon cube just so it'll dissolve a little quicker. I did let that cook until the frozen ginger had defrosted, added water, and part of the jar of crushed tomatoes. And I need this liquid in order to cook the red lentils. Now these are very tiny lentils and they cook quickly. I am going to put a lid on this, but I have to keep checking it because I don't measure the liquid. So I just need to keep an eye on it, make sure it has enough sauce, and I add a little more water if I need to. These are chickpeas that I had cooked in the Instant Pot and put in the freezer. So I drained them, got those in here, and I roasted some frozen cauliflower. This stuff puts off a ton of steam, so I'm always very careful. Please be careful. When you open the oven door, you can get hit with a blast of burning hot steam. So I always stand back. Usually during the cook time, I open the door several times to let some of that steam out. So just be careful. These are ground toasted almonds, the tomato, cilantro, and some lemon juice. And it looks great. It smells amazing. I love all of these flavors. The heat is turned off and I'm adding in fat-free Greek yogurt. This was delicious. We had that rice from lunch. It's sushi rice, but that's what we have. So you can put this over sushi rice. Honestly, I just ate this. It was delicious and very filling. Today I'm making falafel. I will link the inspiration recipe down below. These were dried chickpeas that I soaked overnight in baking soda. I followed the instructions for this part, but I did not follow the instructions for everything because I don't have all the ingredients. So I rinsed these and it said to dry them. So I don't know if I'm doing it right. I think there is a video on the website of this recipe, but I didn't watch it. Ingredients I'm using are onion, garlic powder because I don't have fresh garlic, dried parsley, I don't have fresh parsley, coriander, dried dill, once again, don't have fresh, cumin, black pepper, frozen cilantro, and it called for sesame seeds, which I don't have, so I'm using tahini. Getting those dried chickpeas into the food processor with all the ingredients except the baking powder. And I forgot to mention it, but I did add salt to this. Getting it blended, but it was really too much for my food processor, it seemed like. This was 2 cups dried chickpeas. So I took it out, I split it in half, and then ran it through the food processor. Got it into this mixing bowl, and it seems to be holding up well, so it'll go in the refrigerator for an hour. For dinner tonight, I want to make buttermilk biscuits. I don't know if I've ever made these before, but I have this dried buttermilk powder from Azure Standard, so I am mixing some of that up in the blender. You just add the powder to water. And the blender works really well, just so there aren't any lumps. And the blender works a lot better when you plug it in. Yeah. There we go. I do let this go for a few seconds just to make sure it's really smooth. Getting it in a jar, and then I will put it in the refrigerator. I like to make powdered milks up ahead of time and refrigerate them. Some of them, I think they do say in the ingredients or on the instructions that you're supposed to do that. For dinner tonight, I am going to have a side of polenta, and I am making it in the crock pot on low, so I'm getting this started really early in the day. This is a small crock pot. I don't know the quart size on it. And it's really easy. It's water, the polenta, and salt. I do spray the sides, but I don't know that you need to. And honestly, I don't even know if it helps. This was a new bag of polenta that I opened, so I have taken to using a Sharpie to mark on things when I open them, just so I have some idea of how long it's been open. I would like to think that I would remember, but at this point in life, I know I won't. This is Trader Joe's pita bread that was in the freezer and needed to get used. So I'm going to slice these in half and warm them up for the falafel. And I decided to make a tahini sauce to go along with this. And I thought I would try a tahini mayo type thing. So this is mayonnaise, tahini, lemon juice, salt, and dried dill. I didn't really like it. I did not like that mayonnaise flavor. I don't know why. I just don't think it worked with the tahini very well. So I added in more seasoning, lemon juice, and then I put in Greek yogurt, which definitely helped. I think in the future I would just stick with the Greek yogurt and no mayo. I've made that in the past and I like that better. This has been in the refrigerator. The falafel mix has been in the refrigerator for an hour, stirring in the baking powder. Not really sure how well I got it all incorporated. because this is so thick. But the mixture's sticking together really well. And I have been struggling to get things the right thickness lately. And I realized when I was editing my video last week, there's a ruler on here. So I'm just checking. I think it said about 1/2 inch thick. So I made it a little thinner. Getting all of these shaped. I didn't pay attention. I'm not sure in the recipe how large you're supposed to make these, but this seemed like a really good amount. If you want leftovers. For a family our size, we'll have plenty of leftovers. And these are supposed to be, I think, essentially deep fried. I don't deep fry anything. I don't have any experience doing that, but I decided to try a lot of oil. This is way more oil than I usually use to cook anything, so it's definitely a fry, but it is more dangerous. Be careful. You know, when you flip these over, you can definitely get splattered more easily. But they did get a really nice crispy outside on them. However, I did not add more oil for the next batch, which is these you see on the screen, and they're still getting a really crispy layer. It's just not up the sides a little bit like the first batch. So the one here on the left is from the deeper amount of oil. The one on the right is less oil. I think that was the last batch I did, so it was a lot less. And it's less crispy, but I didn't miss it that much. I think I would just stick with less oil. These turned out great. I do want to make the recipe again in the future using fresh herbs. I think they would be perfect. They were a little dry, but that's on me because I used all those dried herbs. All right, now moving on to the biscuits. I have shortening, that buttermilk, sugar, cream of tartar, baking powder, baking soda, and salt. And I am going to use my food processor to mix these up. This is 2 cups of flour. If the recipe is online, I'll link it below. It's from the Better Homes and Gardens cookbook I have. And I really wish I had it on video, but I forgot to put the seal or the gasket, I'm not sure what you call this gray thing here, on my food processor. And the lid has a bunch of holes all the way around the edges, so when I turned this on, the flour shot out all over the place. But anyway, got the seal on there, added the buttermilk. This does a great job crumbling the shortening in with the flour. Now I'm just trying to get it to be a little more cohesive before I roll it out. Most people would take the time to cut out nice circle shapes. I don't do that. I'm just trying to get more of a square or a rectangle so that I can cut squares essentially. Maybe if I was making these for other people, I would put more effort into how they looked, but this is how I roll at home. And I think I did pretty well with the thickness on these. So I do, in the middle, have the weird looking ones from the corners, but that's okay. These were, they baked well. I don't know that I like them better than regular baking powder biscuits. I think I want to try it with regular buttermilk, not reconstituted buttermilk, and see if that makes a difference. Checking the polenta. I still have a while before dinner, and this is pretty much done, so adding a little more water and turning it to warm. Trying to make a dessert tonight with vanilla, cinnamon, a can or a jar of sliced peaches, cornstarch, and a little bit of salt. I did take out some of the juice before I dump the peaches in here because I don't want it too liquidy. I'm going to chop these up and put them onto a puff pastry sheet. I have never done anything like this before. I just had the puff pastry in the freezer and wanted to think of some way to use them. So this filling, it wasn't great. So I added in lemon juice and nutmeg and it was okay. But it was already sweet, but I don't know how you describe it. One note, I guess. So I added brown sugar, just trying to give it a little more interest. Now I want this to cool down. The cornstarch will help thicken it up as it cools down. And for dinner tonight, I'm making a lentil loaf. It's not vegetarian because I use regular Worcestershire sauce, and that has anchovies in it. Anyway, for this recipe, I need regular oats, and the glass jar I keep in the kitchen was empty, so my husband's helping refill it from the bucket in the basement. From the freezer, I pulled out mushrooms and green beans. Those will also be for dinner. Sauteing the mushrooms in olive oil with some chopped carrots. The recipe calls for almond meal, which I didn't have, so I just chopped up some toasted almonds. Ingredients are thyme, tomato paste, soy sauce, Worcestershire sauce, and then I have lentils that I had already cooked and had in the freezer, so those are defrosted. Black pepper and salt, and then some of those regular oats. For a glaze on top of the loaf, this is ketchup, sugar, and apple cider vinegar. It also calls for Dijon mustard, but I did not have that. Into the food processor, the almonds are in there. I added sauteed onions from the refrigerator, the mushrooms and carrots, which had cooked down, and then all of the ingredients that I mentioned. This is about half of the oats and about half of the lentils. Getting that mixture out of the food processor into a larger mixing bowl, adding in the rest of the oats and the rest of the lentils, and trying to mix this all together. It did take a little bit of arm work. Then formed it into a ball and got it onto the baking sheet. I lined it with parchment paper and just shaping it into more of a loaf. I don't want it really thick in the middle, that's why I made it so flat. And brushing that glaze in a more even layer over the entire top of the loaf, then baking that in the oven for about half an hour. The green beans have been sitting in this pan for about also half an hour, so they've defrosted somewhat, adding lemon pepper, roasted garlic, and kosher salt. In the pan with the beans is avocado oil. Finishing the polenta now, I turn the heat off. I'm adding in Parmesan cheese, grated Parmesan cheese that I had found in the freezer. This butter, it's a soft butter that I mix up, and it is butter, salt, avocado oil, and olive oil mixed together. I do keep it in the refrigerator. And then milk. And I ended up adding more milk than you saw here. This was very good. The timer went off on the lentil loaf, so I'm getting that out of the oven. And I forgot to mention, I didn't put on all of the glaze earlier, or the ketchup mix. So now I'm getting the rest of that smoothed over the top, and then it'll go back in the oven for another 10 minutes. Finishing these green beans with vegan butter that I need to get used up and lemon juice. For frozen green beans, these turned out really nice. And this is done. That dark, kind of burned looking area in the back, that's on me because at the end I turned on the broiler. I thought maybe I would caramelize that ketchup a little bit, but no, it just burned. So that's my fault. This was a really good and filling dinner. I know this veggie loaf is not going to be for everybody, but we like it. And the polenta and the green beans were really good as well. I have to preface this with the fact that I have almost never used puff pastry, and I did not look up a recipe to follow. I was just really lazy. Oh, here I'm flipping it over because I don't even know if there's an upside or the side you're supposed to have facing the filling. This side seemed to have a lot more flour than the other side, but I don't know, so I just left it. So I rolled up the edges all the way around to make a little bit of tray for the peach filling. This did thicken up as it cooled, and I did not end up using all of it. The puff pastry were smaller than I realized when I got them out of the package. This was just one sheet. It was a 2-pack. I sprinkled them with a little brown sugar, and I baked them at 400 degrees for, I think, 15 minutes initially, and the edges that were in the center did not look done enough, so I rotated them and I put them back in the oven for another 5. So the edges look good, but when I cut into this, I could tell the middle did not bake well. It was done. I mean, they were in the oven for a long time, but it didn't puff up at all, I guess you would say. So I'm not sure. I need to actually look at a recipe. I'm wondering if I should bake the puff pastry for part of the time without any topping and then put the topping on it and bake it the rest of the time. So you can see here it's really compressed in the middle, but I mean, it tasted really good, and I really did like the filling after it baked. It turned out pretty well considering it was jarred peaches from Costco. So I do plan to make something like this again. I just need to do my research. Overall, I think this was a really good pantry challenge for us. I enjoyed doing all of this cooking and trying some new things, making some old favorites that maybe take a little more effort than I had been putting in, during the summer and the fall. And it was really good to use up a lot of items in the pantry, especially items that I just was not using or were getting close to their expiration dates. I also was able to clear a lot of room out of the freezer, which is good. I am planning to do an Azure standard bulk food order at the end of this month, February. I think it comes in the 1st of March, and I need a lot of room in the freezer for those items. After I pick up that order, I will be making a video on what I get and how much it costs, so please subscribe if you are interested in that kind of content. So I hope that maybe there were some ideas or inspirations in here for you, and as always, thank you so much for watching.